How's it going? Um, I did a video earlier about prophecy, and I did a little prayer in there for your own prophecy, so make sure to watch that. And this one is chapter 17 and chapter 18. I'm going to read from this book, Mass Control. There we go. I have a bright light on because my face is always so shaded. Okay. Claudia Mullen. In March 1995, Claudia Mullen spoke before a U.S. Presidential Advisory Committee investigating government radiation experiments after World War II. Mullen stated to the commission, quote, "Between the years of 1957 and 1984, I became a pawn in the government's game. Its ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy, all through the use of chemicals, radiation, drugs, hypnosis, electric shock, isolation in tubs of water, sleep deprivation, brainwashing, verbal, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. I was exploited unwittingly for nearly 3 decades of my life. And the only explanations given to me were that the end justifies the means, and I was serving my country in their bold effort to fight communism. I can only surmise my circumstances by saying they took an already abused 7-year-old child and compounded my suffering beyond belief. The saddest part is, I know for a fact I was not alone. There were countless other children in my same situation, and there was no one to help us until now. I am able to report all of this to you in such detail because of my photographic memory and the arrogance of the people involved. They were certain that they would always control my mind. Although the process of recalling these atrocities is not an easy one, nor is it without some danger to myself and my family, I feel the risk is worth taking." Mullen fingered Dr. Sidney Gottlieb and members of the TSD, or Technical Science Division of the CIA, as being the primary co-conspirators in her abuse. In 1958, they told me I was to be tested by some important doctors from the Society, or the Human Ecology Society, and I was instructed to cooperate. I was told not to look at anyone's faces and to try hard to ignore any names because this was a very secret project. I was told all these things to help me forget. Naturally, as most children do, I did the opposite and remembered as much as I could. According to Mullen, I was told by Sid Gottlieb that I was a ripe for the big A, meaning Project Artichoke. Mullen continued, "The next year, I was sent to a lodge in Maryland to learn how to sexually please men. Mullen said that this was an attempt by high-ranking members of the CIA to fill, quote, as many high government agency officials and heads of academic institutions and foundations as possible, so that later when the funding for mind control and radiation started to dwindle, projects would continue. I was used to entrap many unwitting men, including themselves, all with the use of a hidden camera. I was only 9 years old when the sexual humiliation began. I overheard conversations about the part of the agency called ORD, which I found out was the Office of Research and Development. One occasion, Mullen heard a high-ranking CIA mind control doctor state that in order to keep more funding coming from different sources for radiation and mind control projects, he suggested stepping up stepping up the amounts of stressors used and also the blackmail portions of the experiments. He said it needed to be done faster than to get rid of the subjects, or they were asking for us to come back later and haunt them with our remembrances. Mullen said that I would love nothing more than to say that I dreamed this all up and need to just forget it. But that would be a tragic mistake. It would also be a lie. All these atrocities did occur to me and to countless other children, and all under the guise of defending our country. It is because of the cumulative effects of exposure to radiation, chemicals, drugs, pain, subsequent mental and physical distress that I have been robbed out of the ability to work and even to bear children of my own. It is blatantly obvious that none of this was needed, nor would I have ever been allowed to take place, nor would it have ever been allowed to take place at all. And the only means we have to seek out the awful truth and bring it to light is by opening whatever files remain on all the projects, and through another presidential commission on mind control. I believe that every citizen of this nation has the right to know what is fact and what is fiction. It is our greatest protection against this ever happening again. In conclusion, I can offer you no more than what I have given you today, the truth. Mullen recalls that one of her government tormentors had a Scottish accent and called her Lassie. I almost fell off my chair, Mullen's therapist recalled, when she saw a film of CIA mind controller Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron addressing a female patient and calling her Lassie. Later, in a radio interview, Claudia Mellon further described the extent of her mind control ordeal, which she says continued from 1957 to 1983. I was tested at Tulane and at several other places outside of New Orleans. And then once they decided I could become part of the projects, and they had a series of projects, the Umbrella Project, and the Bluebird, which became Artichoke, and then came MK Ultra, and each one on down the line. Each one had a different purpose. I was taken on train trips, small planes to different military bases. I was taken to places out in the woods. I guess Tulane was the worst, where I would receive intensive electric shock, isolation for days, sleep deprivation, where they would attach electrodes to me, and if I started to fall asleep, they would shock me enough to wake me up. You couldn't sleep for days. The message would start, your mother doesn't love you. She left you here. Your mother doesn't want you. You are too much trouble for her. You are a very evil child. You want to hurt people. You want to entice men. My adoptive father was very ill, and he died when I was very young. So I was taught to take to older men and encouraged to become friendly with older men, and eventually, when I was old enough, I was sent out into what they called the operational field, and I would be photographed with government and agency officials, CIA, doctors who were consulted, heads of universities and private foundations, all under the chance that if the government funds started dwindling, they wanted to be able to blackmail or coerce the men into making sure the projects continued. This was the ultimate goal. The projects had to continue at all costs. They had to train a certain amount of young females to go around, and I was sent to a camp in Maryland for 3 weeks when I was 9 years old. And that was my first training on how to sexually please men. I went through a training course like a seminar. There were children of all ages, even younger than myself. Teenagers, young adult girls were there. We were all assigned to someone there. And at the end of the 3 weeks, we were taught. They decided it was a success. It was a CIA project. It was called imaginative research. They had to give a name to it that they could release and document because they couldn't really put down what it really was. It came under the heading MK Ultra Project 74, and I was subject number 3. I remember we were given a number. We were allowed to choose a name after the 3 weeks, and I was sent home. For the next few years, they worked on making sure I was amnesia controlled, making sure the amnesia barriers were in place, so that if something should ever happen to me and the memories should ever start coming back, the pain would come first. I would seek help from the doctors who I was taught were the only people who could help me. The good doctors. I was taught the doctors were the answer to everything. I had no reason to disbelieve that because every time that I was sent home, I was told, "You are a good girl, you are cured, you are going to be just fine. You're going to grow up and have lots of kids." I didn't even realize that they had taken that away from me. I didn't know I couldn't even bear children. According to Mullen, some of her initial programming was done at a camp for boys and girls, run by an official at Tulane University Medical Center. She says that her programming continued until she graduated from high school in 1968, and that by that time, she had been programmed with nearly 100 different personalities. Most of this material was unknown to her until October 1992, when she was attacked and raped in her home. It took 2.5 years to go to trial, Mullen states, and during the time I was in therapy, that's when the memories started coming back. I would never recommend going back to any place where abuse happened to yourself because you immediately go into a flashback. We went to some places around New Orleans that I had been to. One was a camp, an arsenal, that's now a police training facility, and they allowed us to go in and look around. I went back to Tulane University and I showed her the room. I said, "It's room 301. And I described what the hall would look like, what was on the wall, and sure enough, a lot of it was the same. It was exactly the way I described it. Mullen says that she was experimented on at an Edgewood arsenal and is able to verify her account through the memories of some people who were there at that time. It did turn out that one of the people that was verifying the information that I sent interviewed different people. A couple of times they interviewed people that I actually remembered from my childhood that remembered me, only they remembered me as Crystal Stone, which was my name back then. That's what they called me for the experiments. Mullen says that Dr. Sidney Gottlieb was involved in her programming. From 8 years to 16 years, about 8 years. He told me he raised goats. Of you and Cameron, they called a lot of them in as consultants. Next thing I knew, I would be called back to Tulane, and here was Cameraman, her nickname for him, Cameron. He came in around 1960, when I was about 9 or 10. He was there a lot at first, testing how much electricity was too much. They didn't want to fry my brain or anything because they needed me to seem fairly intelligent because I had to associate with people. Her memories of Dr. Green are extensive. Next to Heath, I guess he had the most authority, or whatever you want to call it. He was a German doctor. Liam was his first name. But he hated being called anything but Dr. Green. He was head of Edgewood Arsenal. That's where his office was, in Fort Detrick, Maryland. But he came to Tulane quite a bit and worked with Dr. Heath on the projects. He told me when I was about 14 or 15, he told one of my shadows, or multiple personalities, the story, how he got involved. He said he was Jewish, and he was in a concentration camp when the war ended, and the Nazis had killed his sister and put him in a concentration camp. He had met the angel of death, Mengele, there. And that was his hero, and he used to love to watch him do experiments on twins and everything. Dr. Green said he was put in the camp when he was 15, but when the war ended, the United States paid to bring him back to the United States and put him through medical school, and now they paid him to do these experiments. Mullen recalls, they had no reason to think that they had to hide anything from me. So they would have conversations about the projects, about so-and-so, what he's working on, where he is, where he's from. They would call each other by name. They would have suitcases with their name tags on them, briefcases. I met with Richard Helms, who was deputy director of the CIA for a long time. I met with him lots of times. I mean, I got to know them all on a first name basis. They would say, "Call me uncle." Of course, every now and then they would expect a favor, but then you would be assured they were not being filmed. Somehow they managed to film almost everything. Until you got sent into the field, as you know, as an operative, to target these officials and get them on film. The idea being they wouldn't want a child who had been abused over a long period of time. They would want a child who was innocent and pure, and this was your first time. You were taught other ways to please men, anal intercourse, oral sex, everything else. Under the umbrella folder, the first one was artichoke, which could produce amnesia and also to develop polygraph techniques. There was MK Delta, MK Naomi, which was germ warfare. They were laughing about how they would drop canisters of toxins. They had no idea what effect it was going to have. They would just wait 5 or 10 years and see what the effects on this neighborhood was. A poor neighborhood. I was told about using retarded children in East New Orleans and exposing them to large doses of massive radiation. And they saw no reason to use them because they were already retarded. They just wanted to see what anomalies would develop over the years. On October 23, 1997, Claudia Mullen was shot. For months, she was hooked up to a respirator and is still undergoing a series of surgeries at this writing in May 1999. She believes that she knows who the assailant was, but is unable to discuss the person's identity pending litigation. Chapter 18, Bryce Taylor. Other believed survivors of government mind control programs have come forward to tell their stories. One such person is the pseudonymous Bryce Taylor. Born in 1951, Taylor speaks without hesitation about being the victim of CIA mind control programming. Although in an interview with the author, she confides that she fears that one day all of the information that she has stored in her mind will suddenly come pouring forth and overwhelm her. Taylor recalls after a 1985 auto accident in which her head was smashed through a windshield, she began recovering memory, experiencing flashbacks of her programming and mind-controlled missions. Beginning in 1988, Taylor sought deprogramming from a therapist. Her therapy continued every day for 6 years, and she spent, according to her estimate, a total of $300,000 on recovery. In an attempt to escape mind control, Taylor left her husband and children, whom she believes are still victims of programming. At present, the mind programming of her 20-year-old daughter is breaking down. Taylor relates to me, so that the woman is currently in a near catatonic state, drooling and in diapers. According to Taylor, from infancy, her personality was progressively shattered by her father. She believes that he was also a victim of programming and used CIA dissociative techniques on her in order to transform her into a mind-controlled slave. Taylor believes that from childhood she was sold as a prostitute and used in pornography. She states that at the Baptist Sunday school she attended as a child, the minister and secretary of the church practiced witchcraft. In a short memoir of her experiences, Taylor reported, "I started menstruating. This heralded abuse in rituals involving getting raped and impregnated, sometimes twice a year. When the fetuses were 2 or 3 months old, they were aborted at rituals and ingested to fulfill the beliefs of the group, that it made those participating more powerful. These were devastating, deeply traumatizing, and painful experiences that were repressed along with other traumas." Bryce Taylor believes that throughout childhood she was abused and programmed at military bases, including Edwards Air Force Base, 29 Palms, and Point Mugu Naval Base, all in California. Among the techniques she says were employed on her were sensory deprivation chambers, spin chambers, and light and sound entertainment technologies. She says that she was programmed at a number of other locations, including Barking Sands Missile Base in Hawaii and the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute. Where drugs, light and sound, and sophisticated computerized methods were used on her under the supervision of Louis Jolyon West, Dr. Jolly. Taylor reports that her owner was a popular Hollywood entertainer whom she names. He was much more than an entertainer. Entertainment was actually just a clever hobby of his. I witnessed his participation as a strategically placed, influential, and integrated part of an underworld group that secretly sought to control the world. He maintained direct ties to the White House. She recalls that for her 16th birthday, her husband-to-be surprised her with a visit by train to the San Diego Zoo. According to Taylor, once on the train, she was delivered to a private car where the entertainer, a well-known politician, and 2 other men awaited her. I had sex with each of them as the others watched. Starlight was the name that the entertainer gave her. Starlight was one of my altar personalities. She was to become his starlet. The entertainer took me to several of Hugh Hefner's penthouse parties in Los Angeles. There were windows all around, and at night you could see all the twinkling lights of the city. According to Taylor, she was prostituted to members of the Rat Pack of Hollywood celebrities. As an adult, Taylor says that she had fully taken on the characteristics of multiple personality presidential model, mind slave, used as a courier and sexual toy for government leaders and other world figures. She says that she was also used as a human tape recorder to store the text of secret documents by the use of her photographic memory. This was done so that these high-level players could communicate without records or physical connections within their cabal, a group whose total intention is to bring about a fascist New World Order. Taylor alleges that she was programmed to sexually service politicians. I was used extensively on and around 1968 by top politicians, guaranteed by the Central Intelligence Agency that my training in Project Monarch ensured the highest level of security. The level of mind control I possessed guaranteed that I could be used with these leaders who were involved at the highest levels of national security without my own awareness. Taylor says she went to Alcatraz and other locations and saw mind control programming being done at those sites. Taylor indicates that she was also prostituted for several presidents, to several presidents. What many of the CIA may or may not have been aware of was that a powerful group of men, whom I will call the Council, secretly ran the government. The National Council. Look it up. The council was also able to access me and had programmed me to subversively influence top government officials in ways that benefited them. The CIA's latest technology was being used against our own government. The council studied people's psychological profiles and knew exactly what their likes and dislikes were, their sexual preferences, what perfumes they liked, and any other information that could be used to influence individuals in ways of which they were never ever even aware. The council would pre-program me with instructions, all based on careful research of the targeted person, of what to wear, how to act, what type of sexual stance to take, specific words or phrases to say, and the best time to deliver them. The council always worked up a complete strategy and never sent me to a person unprepared. Taylor has penned an autobiography titled Starshine, written in fictionalized format, she says, in order to protect her from reprisal. As of May 1999, has finished a more complete statement of her experiences called Thanks for the Memories. The Truth Has Set Me Free. Perhaps the most persuasive validation of Taylor's recollections comes from mind control researcher Walter Boart, who recalls seeing Taylor at a charity event in Palm Springs in the company of the entertainer who alleges controlled her. He says that she was just another of the many hostess types that you find working the parties in the Coachella Valley. Other physical proof consists of what she characterizes as numerous stun gun marks over her body. What is the truth about what happened to Bryce Taylor? Admittedly, her story is incredible, outrageous, and bears little resemblance to what is commonly thought of as reality. Because of the outlandish details of her story, linking mind control programming to various prominent entertainers and politicians, one is tempted to reject her story out of hand. The difficulty is that when speaking to her, one does not detect lying. So here's where it gets really touchy for me. Do I share my story? Or do I not share my story? I'm not going to go into detail here. I will say I have memories of Dr. Green whispering in my left ear that I was his favorite and that I was his protege. I have memories of many presidents, politicians, entertainers, and secret council members, world diplomats, I have memories of waking up in bed with a former president, a previous former president, recent. I have memories of, or I have feelings towards specific people, right? Like emotional memories of certain people, the way I feel about them, and how close I was to them, and how intimate I was with them. I can tell you that this is real and that I'm not alone. And there's many of us, millions of people who have been utilized on this level and many other levels. I believe that the progression of what we are witnessing and hearing about now in terms of the babies and the killings and the murderings and the drinking of the adrenochrome, that is only in the last, I would say, 10 years that became popular, if you will. Prior to that point, I don't believe that it was as popular, and if it was very underground. It became open during the Obama administration. It became popularized during that time. Prior to that, I don't think that that particular activity of adrenochrome and spirit cooking dinners was taking place. I believe that came into effect during the Obama administration. So this has been going on for the last 10 years solid, if not 12 years. Or, well, yeah, the last 12 years solid, that part of it has been going on. And the popularity of it and coming into the world stage and being exposed to us and then being open about it has been in the last 5 years, 4, 5, 6 years. Whereas, or really since 2012, right? At that point, at that shift. Prior to that, it was all hidden, deeply hidden. So those of us that are older experienced a little bit different experience than the younger generations and what they're experiencing now in terms of the Monarch Mind Control programs and the MK Ultra programming itself has developed over time, obviously, and it has become much, much more sinister and much more complex. And there's many more projects now than there ever has been. All under the umbrella, though, of MK Ultra. So at the time when I was growing up, I was living in Ridgecrest, where China Lake Naval Weapons Center, Naval Air Warfare Station is, in the middle of the desert. So there was no real like monitoring from anybody. It was very much a secret base. I mean, it was a base, but it was known, right? But what was going on there was happening in secret, and it was really, really deep underground. 2.1 million acres of land that is owned by the government in relation to China Lake. Okay. That's a lot of space. And there's a whole underground system and city there, literally, that I was in and witnessed and experienced and knew about and experienced, right? But not only that, but I was in Nelson, British Columbia, in an underground base. I was in Dulce, New Mexico, and Los Alamos underground bases. I've been in many underground bases in Florida, not underground, but bases in Florida, because there's no underground there, really. A little bit, maybe, but not too much. Florida, all over the country, and in other parts of the world as well. And when I went to I went to some of those places when I traveled. And I think part of why they tried to keep me in the US, right, was because they didn't want me to get my memories back from those places where I had already been, right? And they didn't want me to recall, where I'd been and what I'd done and like who I'd been around and the officials that I had interacted with. So they tried to keep me out of England. That was a big one. They tried to keep me out of England, and I had to cloak, and they like prevented me from getting on a flight that I'd already paid for, that I was 2 hours early for. They derailed me from getting on that flight. So I actually had to go on a bus under the English Channel and then cloak myself and act really like airy-fairy to get into the country. I had to go out of my way, right? And my heart was racing the whole time. I mean, it was crazy. And I was by myself traveling the world, right? So I didn't really have anybody to like tune in with at this moment in this, what was going on. I was like a wayward child, basically, traveling across the world undercover, basically, essentially. So for me, my memories are deep, and I have chosen not to tell my story in detail, in depth. I've shared little bits and pieces of things, and that's what I'm doing here, because I feel like to get the depth and the breadth of what's actually my story, right? That is something that needs to be comprehended in a tome of information that is written in a way that is comprehensive and cannot be disputed, because it's my experience, first of all, but so that I'm not discredited in a way that doesn't serve me, right? So I'm not here for that. I'm not here to, sound like a kook. That's just not, I'm not interested in that. I know what I went through. I know what I've had to do to dismantle the mind control out of my own consciousness. And it's taken me years of my life to do so. Like at least 25 plus years, I've been working diligently to dismantle the programming that kept me, locked into being a slave for that group. And now I can honestly say I'm in a place where if they try, they can't pull anything over my eyes. There's no wool being pulled over my eyes anymore. Like, they can't do it. I'm locked into my body here. I'm like grounded and physically occupying this space. I'm not dissociating. I'm not getting fooled or distracted. There's a lot of distraction that they try to pull in my consciousness to try to keep me out of my power, but I won't allow it. So it's an everyday thing. It's an everyday occurrence where I have to really pay attention to how my energy is being harvested. Now, mind you, it's happening for the whole population. It's not just happening for me personally. It's happening to all of us, especially right now. Right? As much loosh as they can possibly get for themselves to service these deities, these interdimensional beings, they're going to do it by causing all these disasters. But what's happening is it's not having the same effect on people anymore. The lies, the programming, the narrative is all collapsing. It's breaking down. And when it comes to light, when it comes out, and when you see what's really been going on, and they are going to reveal it, there's no choice around that. It has to happen in order for us to move forward. We need to know the truth. Society needs to know what has been going on behind the scenes, period. It's going to be rough. And so many people from that experience will recall their own experience, and they're going to need support. They're going to need help dismantling and recalling the memories and being able to integrate them in a way that is empowering, as opposed to disempowering, where they allow those suicidal programs that are plugged in and programmed into them to take hold. We can't allow that. We need to be on top of this so that we can support those coming out of that. And there's a lot. And now the population at large is under a spell. So not only are we going to be dealing with the release of that spell on the regular population, but on the general population, but we're going to have all the mind-controlled slaves and victims of MK Ultra specifically, where they were utilized in whatever way that shows up, whether that's satanic ritual abuse from satanic cults, or whether that's military operations. However that shows up, we are going to have to be there to support those people coming back into themselves so they can occupy their bodies and incarnate their souls intact in their human form, right? So they can make choices for themselves that are coming from an informed decision-making process from their original thought forms of their own source energy, not from a controlled program running in their consciousness. This is real. So thank you to all the people that are fighting this battle behind the scenes right now that we can't see with our naked eyes, so we don't have proof, right, yet. All the soldiers that were trained, billions of dollars spent to train soldiers to battle underground with very little oxygen, to battle these interdimensional beings and these physical beings underground in the underground bases and blowing that shit up. This is all happening right now. What just happened last week? We had like 20 explosions or more around the world. Then to find out that Beirut had a whole underground network of tunnels that went all over the world. It was a way station. Right? I got something. Hold on. It was a way station for travel, for high-speed train travel. Okay? Among other things. But just to understand that this whole network, this whole experience of what's going on underground that they're not talking about publicly yet is real. So all the stuff you're happening, all the disasters you're seeing is either the deep state panicking and moving forward as quickly as possible with their plan to depopulate the planet and to keep control of the narrative, which they can't do. Or it's the white hats and the government and the soldiers blowing up the deep military bases underground that were abusing children and creating hybrid humans, armies, cloning factories. For real. Okay? We're not done yet. It's still happening. It's going to continue happening. The dark magic must be dismantled. Okay? The stronghold has to be undone. It takes courage, valor, strength. It takes a legion to undo what has been built up over thousands of years with dark magic, with sigils, with sacrifice. Okay? Humans and animals sacrifice. This is no joke. They're losing their power. Thanks to faithful people who believe in a world that can be without suffering. That it's possible. And they hold on to that faith for dear life. And they take action. And they're proactive about it. They're on the offensive. Okay? They're fighting for humanity. So no matter what anybody says about any conspiracy theory, it doesn't matter, because the actions that are being taken right now are changing the entire existence of this planet and everyone on it. We are in a beautiful transition, and it looks messy, and it's really gross, and it's really dark, and it's all getting exposed. Why? So that it can no longer exist. It can't gain hold again. It's not going to have the ability to have that level of power. It just won't. Okay? It is that important, because all of these people have been operating unchecked for years. What did I just read? This was happening in the 90s. These people were coming forward in the 90s, okay? Bryce Taylor is very famous. Then there's Kathy O'Brien. She'll be talked about too. This is no joke, you guys. These are only a few people that came forward. And because a lot of people haven't come forward because they've been scared into submission, threatened with their lives being taken and the lives of those that they care about, their families, their friends, their loved ones. Okay? This is why nobody comes forward. But more and more and more and more and more, it'll blow your mind how many people will come forward. And we haven't even talked about the secret space program. We haven't even talked about what's going on off planet yet. We haven't even gotten there yet, you guys. We're only talking about what's happening on planet. While off planet, there's millions and millions and millions and millions of people that have on this planet who have been off planet, that have come back and have no recollection of what has happened to them. None. What's going to happen when all of those people wake up? You might be one of those people. I don't know. I know who I am. I know what I went through. I've had my memories. Not all of them. There's still more. There's always more. There's always more. There's tons and tons of memories. It's almost like they're never ending, because I was gone for 22 and a half years that I know of so far. And that doesn't include when I was here on the planet and what happened to me here. So you see, there's so much that it's almost hard to contain and keep your mind and keep your sanity. And the only way, honestly, that I have gotten through this is by having close friends that I trust implicitly. And I haven't even told them hardly anything. They don't even know my story, my full story. Nobody does. Why is that? To keep me safe. So just know that it's real. You're not alone. If you have memories, write them down. Document them. Stay present in your life now. Stay present with where you are. Keep yourself grounded. Do whatever you have to do to take care of yourself in this body, to heal yourself and your central nervous system. Okay? You're not alone. And what's coming is going to be profound in supporting the healing process for humanity. on all levels. Mentally, physically, spiritually. All levels. Emotionally, psychologically. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about where the world is going. And I know this to be true because I can feel it. I can actually feel it coming for the first time in my life. Before, it was just a pipe dream. It was a vision, but I didn't see how it was going to happen. And now I have hope that it will. I actually trust that it will now. So I hope that's helpful to you in some way. I'm sending you blessings out there. Just breathe and ground, hang out, hang in. Be with yourself, be in meditation, do your work. This is the time. We've had 6 months to do spiritual work. It's been incredible. The world's been stopped. It's awesome. We needed to stop. It's a blessing. I'll catch you next time.